It's a humid Sunday afternoon in July, and the neighborhood is eerily quiet, save for the muffled roar of a television next door. You're sitting on your porch, watching a beetle navigate the cracks in the wood, perfectly content with the stillness of the air. Suddenly, a massive, synchronized shout erupts from 3 different houses on your street, followed by the sound of rhythmic, aggressive clapping and cheering. You blink, momentarily startled, before remembering that there's a championship game happening today, one that apparently matters deeply to everyone but you. While your neighbors are experiencing spikes in cortisol and adrenaline over a bold trajectory, you feel a strange, calm sense of total detachment. This isn't about being antisocial or boring. It is a fascinating window into how your specific brain processes reward, identity, and social belonging. Something interesting happens in these moments when you realize you are out of sync with the dominant cultural ritual of your entire community. You aren't just missing the sports gene. You are likely operating on a different psychological frequency that prioritizes internal rewards over collective spectacle. Scientists like Dr. Daniel Wan have spent decades studying sports fandom, discovering that for many, a team's win feels like a personal victory. This phenomenon, known as basking in reflected glory, allows fans to boost their own self-esteem by identifying with the success of elite athletes. But as you sit on your porch, you realize that your sense of self-worth isn't tethered to the performance of strangers in uniforms. Your brain doesn't seem to seek the specific shortcut to dopamine. You don't feel bigger when a team wins, or diminished when they lose. Let's go back to when you were 10 years old, standing in the middle of a grassy field. During a mandatory physical education class, everyone around you is screaming, their faces flushed with a desperate, urgent need to get a ball from one side to the other. You, however, are distracted by the way the sunlight hits the dew on the grass, or the complex social hierarchy forming between teammates. You might have felt a bit broken then, wondering why you couldn't summon the same fire that seemed to consume every other kid there. But what was actually happening was that your brain was prioritizing different environmental inputs. You were observing the how and why rather than the who won. Research suggests that non-fans often have a higher tolerance for being out of sync with group dynamics, preferring independent thought over tribal cohesion. This independence isn't a flaw. It's a developmental trait that often leads to a more stable emotional baseline, regardless of external community events. Fast forward to your early 20s, standing in a crowded bar where every single head is tilted upward toward a glowing neon screen. The air is thick with tension, and you find yourself mimicking the facial expressions of those around you just to avoid being questioned. There is a subtle, social tax paid by those who don't follow sports. A feeling of being a traveler in a land whose language you don't speak. You notice the patterns. The way "we" is used to describe a team the fans have never actually played for or even met. Social identity theory explains that this "we" provides a powerful sense of belonging, turning a group of strangers into a temporary, tight-knit family. For you, however, belonging is built through shared values, deep conversation, or collaborative projects, rather than the arbitrary outcome of a timed match. You may find the lowbrow stigma often attached to sports fandom by certain social elites to be just as confusing as the game itself. You don't look down on the fans, but you also don't understand the mental perversion some early sociologists claimed was inherent in the obsession. Something fascinating occurs when you realize that your brain simply doesn't hook into the uncontrollable outcome reward system the same way others do. Most sports fans are essentially dopamine gamblers, riding the highs and lows of a result they have zero power to influence or change. You, perhaps instinctively, prefer to invest your emotional energy into things you can actually control: your work, your art, or your personal relationships. This preference for agency over spectacle is a hallmark of the non-obsessed mind, leading to a life with fewer vicarious disappointments and stresses. Think about the morning after a major loss for the local team. The entire city seems to be under a dark, heavy cloud. Co-workers are irritable. The radio host is grieving. And there is a palpable sense of collective mourning for a game played by millionaires. You walk into the office with your usual energy, entirely unaffected by the tragedy that occurred on the field the night before. In this moment, your lack of obsession isn't an absence. It's a shield that protects your mental well-being from the volatility of fandom. You aren't experiencing the threat to identity that one describes when a fan's team fails or an athlete commits a public transgression. While fans are suffering each defeat, you are moving through your day with a consistent, unbothered focus on your own tangible goals. Interestingly, some people who don't care for sports find them boring, simply because they have other activities they prefer to do. Your brain might be wired for depth over spectacle, seeking complex narratives or intricate problems rather than the repetitive win-loss cycle of athletics. While a fan sees a battle of titans, you might see a repetitive loop of statistics and physical movements that lacks long-term meaning. This doesn't mean you lack passion. It just means your passion is directed toward things that offer a different kind of intellectual stimulation. Now, consider the social identity aspect. The way sports serve as a normative default for what it means to be a fan. If you tell someone you are a fan of 18th century poetry or obscure coding languages, you might be met with a confused stare. But being a sports fan is the prototype. It is the socially accepted way to show passion, excitement, and even public aggression. By choosing not to participate, you are essentially deviating from the prototype, which can sometimes lead to a subtle social stigmatization. You've likely had that awkward moment where a stranger tries to make small talk by asking, "Did you see the game last night?" There is a split second of tension where you have to decide, do you fake it, or do you admit you have no idea? Admitting you don't care often feels like admitting you don't like oxygen, because sports are so deeply woven into the social decor of life. But there is power in that admission. It is a quiet declaration that you don't need the default script to navigate human connection. You are comfortable building bridges through other means, finding common ground in humor, shared experiences, or the quiet observation of the world. For many, sports are a comforting distraction or a sense of normalcy during times of great global or personal uncertainty. You might find your normalcy in a quiet book, a long walk, or the rhythmic process of learning a new, difficult skill. Neither approach is superior. They are simply different ways the human mind attempts to regulate stress and find a sense of place. However, your path often requires more internal scaffolding. You have to build your own communities rather than joining the prepackaged ones. You might find your team in a small hobby group, a specialized online forum, or a circle of friends who also value weird interests. These connections might be smaller in scale, but they are often built on specific individual choices rather than geographic or family traditions. Some researchers have noted that athletes and fans often value action, physicality, and results over feelings, process, or psychological depth. If you are the type of person who doesn't obsess over sports, you likely lean toward the latter, the process and the why. You might find the psychology of the fans more interesting than the mechanics of the game being played on the field. You are the observer in the stands, watching the crowd's reaction to a goal and wondering about the neurological pathways firing in unison. This observational voice allows you to appreciate the human condition from a distance, seeing the beauty in the passion without being consumed. There is also a developmental aspect to this. Many non-athletes were categorized early on as having a lower personality level in some outdated studies. We know now that this is nonsense. Non-athletes simply possess different personality clusters, often leaning toward higher openness to new, non-traditional experiences. You were the kid who wasn't learning motor skills to achieve competitive success, but perhaps you were learning the skill of independent observation. While the jocks were learning team dynamics, you were likely learning how to be comfortable in your own head, without external validation. This early independence often translates into an adult life where you aren't easily swayed by groupthink or the latest cultural trends. You have a built-in filter that asks, "Is this actually valuable to me?" before you invest your time, money, or emotional energy. In a world designed to keep you hooked on the next big event, your indifference is actually a form of psychological freedom. You don't have to worry about FOMO, the fear of missing out, when it comes to the Sunday night score or the trade deadline. Your FOMO might be directed toward a missing piece of information, a lost connection with a friend, or a missed opportunity for growth. This shift in focus allows you to cultivate a rich internal life, where the highlights are your own achievements rather than someone else's. You are the lead character in your own narrative, not a spectator in someone else's multi-million-dollar business venture. Think about how much time is reclaimed when you aren't spending hours every week analyzing stats, watching pre-game shows, and scrolling sports news. This time, thousands of hours over a lifetime is redirected into your own development, your own peace, and your own unique curiosities. You might be the person who knows everything about 1920s architecture, or the person who can fix any engine, or the person who listens. These niche identities are just as valid and normal as being a die-hard fan of a football club. The only difference is that your fandom doesn't have a stadium or a massive marketing budget to tell you it's important. You have to decide it is important for yourself, which is a much more profound psychological exercise than following the crowd. There is a shared humanity in sports, as some advisors point out, a way to find meaning in collective wins and losses. But you find your shared humanity in the small, quiet interactions that happen when the TV is finally turned off. You find it in the way a friend's eyes light up when they talk about a book, or the silence shared during a sunset. Your support system isn't a team of players, but a small network of people who see you for who you actually are. You are brave in a way many don't realize, taking the risk to do the work of being different in a sports-obsessed culture. It can be lonely to be the only person at the party who doesn't know who the quarterback is. But that loneliness has a purpose. It forces you to look deeper, to find connections that aren't based on the easy, surface-level talk of scores and stats. You are building a different secret to your own happiness, one that isn't dependent on the physical prowess of a stranger. As you move through adulthood, you might notice that your non-fan status becomes a point of interesting connection with others like you. There is an instant, silent bond when you meet someone else who also doesn't get it. A shared relief in finding another outlier. Together, you can talk about the things that actually matter to your specific brains, the deep stuff that sports often distract us from. You can discuss the psychology of the fan without being one, maintaining a rational, inclusive perspective on the whole absurd custom. You realize that fan identity can improve well-being for some, but you found a way to achieve that well-being without the threats. Your self-esteem is bolstered not by a trophy in a case, but by the goals you've set and met in your own real life. You are physically fit or healthy because you enjoy the movement itself, not because you're trying to emulate an athletic idol. Your pride is personal. Your happiness is self-generated. And your self-confidence is built on the bedrock of your own lived experience. This is the important truth that often gets lost in the roar of the stadium. You don't need a team to be whole. You don't need a common cause that involves a scoreboard to feel a sense of community or meaning in your life. You are already part of a much larger, imagined community. The community of independent thinkers who find joy in the unprototypical parts of life. So the next time the neighborhood erupts in a synchronized shout and you feel that familiar flash of detachment, don't worry. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is seeking meaning in the quiet, the complex, and the personal. You are the weird one, perhaps. But as some experts say, doing what is perceived as weird is the path to being great. You are great at being you, without the need for jersey, a ticket, or a we that doesn't include your actual self. Your life is not a waste of time just because it doesn't involve watching others play a game for 3 hours. It is a rich, varied, and deeply personal journey that you're navigating with a clear-eyed focus on what truly matters to you. And that in itself is a victory more significant than any championship ring or gold medal could ever represent for you. You are free to be the observer, the thinker, the creator, the one who stays on the porch while the world screams at the screen. You are not missing out. You are simply tuning in to a different, more personal broadcast of the human experience. And honestly, that makes perfect sense for a brain that values its own agency over the vicarious highs of a stadium crowd. Your indifference is a gift. A space where you can build something that belongs entirely to you and no one else. It's a quiet afternoon. The beetle has finally crossed the porch, and you realize you wouldn't trade this peace for any stadium roar. You are comfortable in the silence, satisfied with your own thoughts, and ready to face the world on your own unique terms. If you've ever felt out of place for not following sports culture, hopefully this helps you understand the strength in your detachment. There is a whole community of us who find more excitement in a quiet discovery than in a loud championship win. Would you like me to explore the psychology of another common social mismatch, like the pressure to be an extrovert?